At the start of 2024, Disney announced that its successful streaming series, The Mandalorian, would not conclude with its third season, and instead would pick up where it left off with a feature-length film. This will be the first theatrical Star Wars release we've gotten since Rise of Skywalker in 2019. After the massive following the Mandalorian series has amassed, and the plethora of other Star Wars series that have appeared in its wake, you would assume that this would be an obvious box office hit, right? Most aren't so sure. The Mandalorian and Grogu is expected to open to around 70 to 80 million, on a budget of around 166 million, which is not bad, but it would be the lowest ever opening for a Star Wars film. Solo currently holds that record with 100 million. So today, let's break down The Mandalorian's television rise and its potential cinematic downfall. So, a brief history of the Star Wars trajectory in recent years. In 2012, Disney acquired Star Wars, and in the past about 20 years, it had been largely dormant aside from some absolutely fantastic animated content. Just to preface, I am a little bit of a Star Wars fan. And I really credit my investment into the Star Wars franchise to my best friend Abby. I was familiar with Star Wars, but I really wasn't that into it until she peer pressured me into watching the Clone Wars series while we were in high school, and I was immediately sucked into it. The Clone Wars series really expands on the Star Wars universe to an insane degree. Even though many people have reduced the Clone Wars to just like a kid's show, I think it has some of the best characters and story arcs out of any Star Wars content ever. And it truly delves into a lot of like social, political, economic, and moral crises over the course of this series in a way that I think is a step above a regular children's show. Anyways, after Disney got the rights, they decided it was time that Star Wars returned to the live action and returned to theaters. So in 2015, The Force Awakens comes out. It was an absolute smash hit. I remember going to see it in theaters, and this was pre me being really into Star Wars, of course, and it was like the cinematic event of the season. There was definitely some criticism that came with this film, but it's a very critical fan base, so this was to be expected. And overall, I would say that the first installation of the sequel trilogy was a success. Me personally, I still watch it sometimes. I still enjoy it. But then came the other two. Each one seemed to further diverge from the overall tone and feel of Star Wars, and some of it was just completely disregarding existing Star Wars canon. I mean, some of the sequel trilogy straight up just disrespected its predecessors, specifically by replacing R2-D2 with a glorified beach ball. How dare you? So by the time Rise of Skywalker came out, at least half of the Star Wars fanbase had just agreed to disregard the sequel trilogy altogether. But Disney wasn't done. The same year we got Rise of Skywalker, we also got our first live-action Star Wars TV show on Disney+, The Mandalorian. It was like they'd struck gold. This felt like classic Star Wars, with Western elements and practical effects. It drew a lot of its story from the original trilogy, from the prequel trilogy, and a lot of context from the Clone Wars. And of course, when Grogu, or as he was popularly known at the time, Baby Yoda, came on the screen, the show cemented itself in Star Wars iconography. And then season 2 was just amazing. It reintroduced some iconic characters like Boba Fett and Luke Skywalker, while also introducing some characters like Bo-Katan and Ahsoka Tano in live action for the first time. The first season had a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. The second season maintained a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. It kind of felt like they could do no wrong at this point. But then they did. You see, The Mandalorian couldn't just be this wonderful homage to the Star Wars of old. No. It had an alternative purpose. Disney needed The Mandalorian to patch up some pretty significant plot holes. I think we all vividly remember the tragedy of Palpatine's sudden return in Rise of Skywalker. The almost unexplainable return of the very iconic, very dead villain of the previous trilogies. It immediately just had people rolling their eyes. Like, did we need him? I thought this was the Skywalker saga. At this point, it could just be the Palpatine saga as well. Especially considering the fact that we ended with Rey, who's a Palpatine. She's not a Skywalker. I could go on about that end scene, but I won't. Because Rey is essentially Palpatine's daughter. Or rather, as they don't explain in the movie, and you kind of had to look it up afterwards to find this out, she's the daughter of a failed clone of Palpatine. Just a whole lot of nonsense out of nowhere. So you know what they did? They slapped a Mandalorian-shaped band-aid on it. We know in season 1 that Grogu is being hunted by the Empire because of his abilities. They need him for something. As the seasons go on, it just becomes abundantly clear that what they're trying to do is show us that Palpatine didn't suddenly return. There had been a plan in place decades prior. The Empire had always planned to come back, and Palpatine was always a part of that. They just needed a Force-sensitive being like Grogu, who had a ton of midichlorians, to properly clone a Force-sensitive version of Palpatine. Duh! So this whole story over the course of the 3 seasons of The Mandalorian were basically just to say, look, Rise of Skywalker wasn't completely random. This had been in the works for a long time. Which I respect them trying to add some substance to that plot twist, but like, you can't do that after the fact. You can't build the house and then add the foundation after. And once we get to the 3rd season of The Mandalorian, even though we already got the idea of what they were trying to say, I feel like they were just hammering it in too far. There's even a scene where we see clones of Moff Gideon at this Empire base. Like, we get it. And of course there were other issues with season 3 of The Mandalorian. It wasn't just that they were continuously trying to fill this bottomless plot hole. Like I said, seasons 1 and 2, 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, another 93%, and then season 3 dropped to 84. And the audience score dropped to 51. And if you count the honorary season of The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, the ratings were not good. When season 3 concluded, viewership had dropped, excitement had dropped, but Star Wars is Star Wars. So when the movie was announced, people were still hyped. But was it enough hype? The trailer for season 3 of The Mandalorian smashed records within its first 24 hours, getting like over 80 million views across platforms. Meanwhile, the trailer for the movie accumulated like 100 million views, but it took like 4 months to get there. People haven't had a cinematic Star Wars experience since 2019. And The Rise of Skywalker kind of left a bad taste in some people's mouths. Instead, we've been getting a bunch of TV shows. All of this content is putting them at risk for the same issues Marvel was having of valuing quantity over quality. It's just really hard for people to have confidence in this movie, and I'm not sure if Disney has any either. May is kind of a big month for a lot of Star Wars fans. As you know, May the 4th has been a pretty big deal in previous years. But The Mandalorian and Grogu isn't coming out until May 22nd. Instead, Maul is being prioritized, with the show concluding on May the 4th. Understandably, maybe The Mandalorian isn't releasing that weekend because they want to avoid competition with movies like Devil Wears Prada. But the later you release in May, the closer you get to June, which is going to be a highly competitive month for movies. Your release windows are important. You need to make sure you have your audience's attention, and you need to know what your competition is. And they're missing May the 4th and getting a little bit too close to movies like Masters of the Universe and Disclosure Day and Scary Movie 6. I want this movie to win for 2 reasons. 1, I love The Mandalorian. I really do. I think it's a great show. 3rd season, But overall, I really like it. The 1st season is still mind-blowing to me. The story was so unique, the technology was innovative, and it was just riveting. I enjoyed the episode structure. It seems like they jumped from place to place, side quest to side quest, but that allowed us to explore so much more of the Star Wars universe in a way that reminded me of the scope of the Clone Wars. I would love it if Din Djarin and Grogu's story could carry on for just a little bit longer. The second reason I want this movie to succeed, Star Wars needs to return to theaters. They're practically throwing different Star Wars TV shows at us. We had The Mandalorian, we had Book of Boba Fett, we had Ahsoka Tano, we had the Obi-Wan show, we had The Acolyte, we had Skeleton Crew. Like, it's a lot. I'm done. I can't keep up. It's the same issue that I'm having with Marvel. I'm not watching all that. I don't have time. Sitting on my couch and binging a Star Wars show is never gonna be the same as going to the theater and getting to experience this galaxy far, far away on the big screen. We need more of that. So I really want this movie to succeed so that we keep getting it. But like I said, it just seems like nobody is confident in the success of this movie. I'm not sure that Disney is counting on it, the fan base isn't counting on it, and everyone seems to be predicting a box office fail. But I don't know. I would love to know what you think. Are you going to go see this movie when it comes out? Do you think it'll have a surprising box office result? Do you want more Star Wars in cinemas? I'm curious, but if you got this far, thanks. And I'll see you next week for my monthly recap on my journey to see 75 different movies in theaters. Thanks!